The NFL draft is about to get underway.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there tuning in, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, on tomorrow's episode, we're going to talk about what one college football analyst had to say about the Sooners' prospects of winning 10 games and making the college football playoff. But it's NFL draft time. It is draft season. And the Oklahoma Sooners have several defenders that have a chance to be drafted. It's at a point in this team's progression and development that we're looking at Brent Venables' teams. At the same time, we're still kind of working with the transition time, right? So you've got guys like Danny Stutsman and Billy Bowman, Ethan Downs that were recruited by Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch, but stayed with Oklahoma, were part of the transition. And this kind of signifies the last kind of remaining signs of the Lincoln Riley era. Why you're only going to see a few 2 to 3 players drafted from Oklahoma is because when that transition happened, there was a big drop off in talent, whether the transfer portal left or the setback in the recruiting or whatever. There was a lot of guys that left in the transfer portal after Lincoln Riley left, and his recruiting at the end of his tenure at Oklahoma was not great. Go back to that 2019 recruiting class, right? It did not turn out like you hoped. The 2020, 2021 classes weren't very good. Aside from Danny Stutsman and Billy Bowman and Ethan Downs, you didn't really get a ton of talent that stuck around at Oklahoma or that did stick around and actually develop. So where will Oklahoma's, top draft options end up? Well, a lot of the mock drafts I'm seeing on Danny Stutsman and Billy Bowman, 3rd or 4th round. Some of the guys that I've talked to in draft circles, with Billy Bowman, concerned a little bit about his size, but I liken him a lot to an Anton Winfield that came out of Minnesota, ended up at Tampa Bay. This was a dude that similar size to Billy Bowman, a guy that was not super tall, but played safety and was just a playmaker. He's a guy that had a bunch of interceptions in college, a dude that could create tackles for loss. He played with speed. He played with athleticism. Kind of, again, reminds me of Billy Bowman. Bowman is, again, being projected 3rd or 4th round. I think that somebody will like the traits a little bit more and think that they can develop him into being a starting safety at the NFL level. I think he's got a chance to have a good long career at the NFL level because of his athleticism. He's got that returning ability as well that gives him the opportunity to play some special teams, and that will move the needle for coaches. Guys that can play both on defense and play some special teams are going to be impactful, and they're going to like that guy maybe a little bit more than draft analysts might because of their ability to do several different things for you. I mean, he can play on kick coverage teams. He can play on the punt return team, the kick return team, and he can play a lot of snaps for your defense. On Danny Stutsman, the knock that I've heard against him is coverage. And I don't think it's because he can't cover. I think it's not a strength of his. He's going to have to continue to work at that. But you're looking at a guy that's really, really good against the run. And while the NFL has become a passing league, you still got to have guys that can play a good run defense. Because what are we seeing from teams like Detroit, Philadelphia, Los Angeles Rams? These are teams that have gone back to the ground. San Francisco, those teams like to run the ball a lot, and they like to use the run game to set up the pass. Whereas that's kind of more of a cliche. You've started seeing more teams using the pass as their primary function on offense, and then the run game mixed in a little bit more. Those 3 teams that I mentioned, and Baltimore, there's another one, they're going back to a early 2000s brand of football that's we're going to run the football, and then we're going to use the run to set up the pass. And you got to have guys that can defend the run. And Danny Stutsman does that very, very, very well. And so while, again, NFL draft analysts might be a little bit lower on a guy like Danny Stutsman, I think teams will be higher on Stutsman than what the mock drafts are saying, simply because he's a good run defender. He's going to be a strong locker room presence. He's going to be a leader in the locker room, and he's going to be a kind of a coach favorite because of how willing he's willing to work. Same with Billy Bowman. I think both of those guys are going to have coaches impressed enough to take them a little bit higher than where they're being projected. And then you go to a guy like Ethan Downs. I think he's the next best shot that Oklahoma's got at having somebody drafted. Oklahoma's streak of, three draft picks in a draft, that's going to be a little bit at risk this draft. But if a guy like Jonah Laula can get drafted in the 7th round, I don't see any reason why a guy like Ethan Downs can't get drafted. Ethan Downs, I think, again, is going to be one of those guys that coaches just love, that defensive coordinators love, because he is just so technically sound. He is so fundamentally sound that, okay, you might not have big stats out of him, but don't sneeze at the sack totals. You're seeing a guy like Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M getting projected in the 1st round, and he doesn't have near the production that Ethan Downs has. But because he's got a bunch of traits and he's got size, people are willing to overlook that. Well, production still matters, and production at the Power 4 level still matters. And Ethan Downs has that production at the Power 4 level, and he's so technically sound. When he's being asked to set the edge, he's going to set the edge. He's not going to get sucked inside. He's not going to lose contain. He's going to do what he's supposed to do out there. And I think defensive coordinators are going to love that about Ethan Downs. So we'll see. Again, who knows how the draft is going to go, but that is where I find it fascinating. And that's part of the reason it's so fun, is that you don't know what's going to happen. But I would be surprised if both Ethan Downs and Billy Bowman fell out of the 3rd rounds. I could see a guy like Bowman or Stutsman being drafted as high as the 2nd round, just depending on team and fit and coaches and general managers and what they're really looking for and what they like. And then I think Ethan Downs gets drafted. I think, he could be a 7th round pick. It wouldn't surprise me in the least to see that happen. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. You can follow Jay at Unfair Sports. You can also check out his work over at Unfair Sports on YouTube. The show is at Locked On Sooners on all of your favorite social media platforms. But until next time, I'm John Williams, Boomer Sooner.